always, I'm joined by...
Nate Morgan Locke, hello.
And I was going to say, and by Glen Scrivener, but he's not here.
Not yet.
Not yet. He may well arrive. We fear there may have been a slight miscommunication about
But
the
never
time
mind.
this was beginning. But it's all good, so I'm sure he may arrive in the middle. So do stay tuned for that good content.
Glen fans ought to stay tuned for
Absolutely.
the potential appearance of Glen.
So here we are, we're at the SpeakEasy. We're having ourselves a bit of a little party this evening. Or should I say, it's not a party, it's definitely a work event.
It is a work
It's a
event.
work event here. And we're going to be chatting a little bit about Boris and Partygate, and then we're going to think about the film The Road to Perdition in our kind of film segment that we've been starting last week. As always, we want to engage with you guys in the comments. So as we're chatting away, please do get on the top chat and do let us know what you're thinking about the different things we're talking about. And then we'll try and engage with that a little bit later in the show as well and respond to those things. So we're talking about Boris, talking about Partygate.
Partygate.
What has gone on?
What has gone on?
What has gone on?
Well, it's quite a difficult thing to sum up, isn't it? There was a global pandemic. I don't know if you heard about it, that it sort of really kicked off in March 2020. And ever since then, just going to switch a little microphone. Ever since that time, there have been rules, haven't there, Paul? There have been rules about what you can and cannot do, with how many people you can do those things, and how far away from them, and how much of your face needs to be covered, and how many injections you need to have. So they've been changing, lots of different rules at different times.
Yep, it is.
And the person in charge of setting the rules, the rule maker, has been Boris Johnson,
Became the rule breaker,
our Prime Minister.
chief servant.
And and bizarrely, over the last week, I mean, it was slightly more than a week, well, maybe a month or so, that there have been some really intentional sort of exposés of particular events that were happening in Downing Street itself.
Yep.
And those have been released with increasing frequency over the past week. And I think culminating in the news that Downing Street was having a fairly raucous, unsocially distanced party the night before the funeral of Prince Philip. And so the major optical kind of representation is that you have the image of Her Majesty the Queen sitting alone in the chapel in Windsor. And she's not allowed to sit next to her family as she grieves the death of her husband. And yet the night before, the very people who were insisting that those rules should keep her socially distanced from her own family, that those people were living outrageously in breaking those rules. And Boris obviously is someone, well, he's the figurehead, he's the Prime Minister, and as you yourself have said, I believe, he must go. This is too much.
I feel he should go.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he should have gone for a long time.
Right.
I mean,
Okay.
I think generally, as a leader, he's lacked integrity generally.
Yeah.
And you ought to hold leaders to a high standard. And he's got a bit of a shady past. You know, he's on recording, isn't he? Kind of. There was a whole thing about journalists beating up other journalists.
Yeah.
All kinds of shady stuff.
Yeah.
That's there recording. You kind of think, how did he get to where he is? So I think he should go. But I mean, what do you think? Do you think he should go?
I think he should, and I think that he's a guy whose lack of integrity is there to display in his own home life. The fact that it is unclear how many children Boris Johnson has is outrageous. Now, as a culture, we don't have much of an issue with that these days. Certainly, leaders of the past would be expected. Has your microphone been off again for the entire time?
Well, you know, I rely on the tech team to
It's a good job we've got them.
do this for me.
It's a good job we've got them. We're very grateful for them. But yeah, Boris Johnson has been has cheated multiple times and lied, in his home life, And that lack of integrity in that sphere seems to be now blatantly obvious to see in every other sphere as well.
We shouldn't be surprised that it seeps over into his work life.
Yeah.
But you're right, and that's the thing. I think that's quite an interesting thing anyway, isn't it? That some people would say, well, what does it matter what he gets up to in his private life?
Yeah.
Like you might say about anyone in their work life. Who cares what you do at the weekend, as long as you do your job?
In the privacy of their own home, 10 Downing Street. What's the problem?
Yeah. But I think,
can't a guy kick back?
But maybe we as Christians would question that,
Yes.
as a general rule anyway.
Yeah.
That, like you said, we know that he's got this kind of lack of integrity in his home life. So why, of course, would that not then seep into what he's like as a person when he's doing his job? And I think for me as well, I mean, the thing to think about is so many people have been outraged by this.
Yes.
And it's kind of, well, why is everybody outraged? And I think it is because so many people think, well, we look at what we sacrificed.
Yeah.
I mean, and like you say, the Queen is that picture, isn't she, of a woman who had been married for heaven knows how many years, 60 odd years, and she can't even sit with her family at the funeral. And, I read comments. There was a thread on Twitter of people kind of coming forward. It was initially started by, I think it was a doctor.
Yes, was this the one where people were basically confessing how they'd broken the rules? So, in a sense, what is it that is significant enough that you would break the COVID rules to go and do?
I think we've got...
and it's a major
I think I might have
question.
some of these we can see on the screen, actually. So there was a guy who said, during the second lockdown, I was working... That kind of then started a whole thread of people saying, well, actually, we broke the rules.
Yeah.
But it was the large majority were people saying, Dad was dying.
Yes.
And I held my mum,
Yeah.
and things like that.
Yeah.
And it was in stark contrast to, we fancied having a bit of a knees up.
Yeah.
And when you read about suitcases full of
wine
from the local,
and buying a new fridge, a fresh fridge to keep it chilled.
Yeah, so you can see why people are angry. At this.
And I think, and that is exactly the point: is when you're going to break a rule, I think we understand the difference of breaking a rule, sort of almost reluctantly. And in order for humanity to prevail, right?
Yeah.
So for this kind of rule to be broken, you need a good enough reason. And yes, working in number 10 Downing Street must be a very stressful job at the best of times. And working at Downing Street when you're in the middle of a pandemic and you are constantly having to prepare for new regulations and you're working late into the night. And I'm sure, again, that's a very, very stressful time.
Yep.
But to be sort of relaxing and letting yourselves, just have works do. Well, that's the thing, work do, Yeah. Work night out in, because you're not allowed to leave.
Yeah.
There's a difference between a workout and a work night out. very different things, aren't they? Or a night out. But the issue is that those people are working incredibly hard in incredibly stressful environments, and they are having to make all these sorts of decisions. And it is understandable that given the intensity of their experience of doing that, they might think, oh, and now we could do with a break. We could have a drink.
Yeah.
The challenge is that that's not quite the same as saying, like this doctor is saying, I was prepared to break COVID regulations in order to embrace a widow who has not been embraced since her husband died because of the regulations. That feels like a much more appropriate time to do it.
Absolutely. I think as well that, again, we are confused as to exactly what the rules were at different points. But there were points where you could have 6 people and whatnot. So conceivably, you could have 6 people in the garden having a drink.
Yes.
There was a point in the lockdown when that was
2 meters apart.
all those kind of things. Yeah.
With a pork pie.
Or a Scotch egg.
And a hat. And 1 foot on the floor.
But like that is, if there was a group of people who are working together and they were observing the regulations and they had a drink, I don't think even I would have been that fussed by that. It's the fact that you send an email out to like 100 people.
Well, yeah, that's where it just gets.
That's where it starts to break down a bit.
Yeah.
And I think as well, people feel that there is been this apology, but it feels like there's an apology because it was found out.
But also in a very strange sense, clearly, lots and lots of people knew these sorts of events were going on, and I'm sure lots and lots of people will know that they were themselves, not paying attention to the particulars of a COVID regulation at any particular time, right? So I think it's sort of silly to suggest that absolutely everyone was right there precisely following the regulations. I'm sure some people absolutely were.
Oh, yeah.
But I think there's a strange situation where there has clearly been an intentional release of these pieces of information.
Sure.
In order to cause the maximum damage to the Prime Minister and the government at this time. And, we probably don't have to look very far to see who it was. Mr. Cummings, maybe part of this.
The shoe fits.
Who himself had to go through, that chastening time of sitting in the garden of Number 10 and confessing to driving to, Barnard Castle. Literally the only reason anyone outside of the northeast knows where that is.
Absolutely.
Is because that's where you go to get your eyes tested.
Yeah.
So and Matt Hancock, right, who again broke, the legislation, had been on the news condemning in the strongest terms the fact that Neil Ferguson, who was Imperial College, was he the statistician or the epidemiologist or something for that, who himself had broken the regulations. So you just sort of think there's a very sort of strange, like, who's next? Like, who is the next person?
Is there a sense there that people don't feel they're going to get caught? Like, because I think if I were, let's use that example of Matt Hancock.
Yeah.
I think if I was standing up as Matt Hancock and saying this is what is going on, and you condemn this, then in the back of my mind I'd be going, I can't stand up and condemn this because I know I'm going to get caught. I'll get found out. But is there just this sense? Do you think that they just don't think they can just get away with anything?
So
basically?
Part of the thing is I think that people who are sort of full-time politicians who are spending repeated time in front of the news, in front of the media, being interviewed by people, they're very conscious of having this cameras on, lights are on, and we go, and you've got 30 seconds to tell us, what the news is, and you've got to get your soundbite in, and then we break and we go off. Yep. So I think they become so practiced at the performance of a life, the mask wearing. I am now, Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson, politician doing the thing. And they know that that's the thing that goes out. And most of what they normally do, the stuff they get onto, up to when the camera's not on, they see a really strong distinction.
Yeah, sure.
Hello.
Hi! Sorry if that was a bit
Thanks for
loud.
joining
us. Yeah, it's 7 o'clock.
7. All right.
Yeah,
Cool.
we're just in the middle. Yeah, we're just.
Have you spoken about Matt Hancock and Professor Neil Ferguson?
Yes.
We're literally just finished. Yeah, just chatting about that.
talked.
Yeah,
Just on Sky News. Amazing.
yeah.
But his ability to condemn and conduct himself in exactly the same way.
I think you know
Profound
we.
hypocrisy of it.
I think the thing that I find interesting about all this is obviously, and myself included here, I look at these people, and you look at Boris, and I'm of course very quick to condemn,
Yeah.
and right to condemn
Yeah.
that kind of behaviour, particularly because there doesn't seem to be a genuine repentance.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a kind of heartfelt thing. It feels like a PR exercise. You know, I always have to remember, of course, we all wear these masks the whole time. You know, we are all, of course,
Hold
we are
on.
all.
Just to clarify, which masks are you talking about now?
Yeah,
The
so,
wearing of the...
not the cloth masks.
not
I'm talking about
the-
the masks.
and
The front we put on for all people.
Okay. The
you
pretense, right?
Know,
Okay.
you know.
We all wear
same thing, right?
masks,
We all- Same
metaphorically speaking.
The whole thing's a pretense.
It's all a big joke. Yeah.
But so I think, you know, we need to be aware that we ourselves can become. We can point the finger when really we're pointing back at ourselves as well. We should be aware of that. But equally, I do think it is valid to say, look, these people are supposed to be leaders. They're supposed to be servants. They should be held to a higher standard, and they should lead by example as well.
And this actually brings us to the article that you wrote for Premier Christianity on the outrage, because there is such a strong feeling of outrage at the hypocrisy. Part of that is clearly because people's experiences of the lockdown rules being heavy on them and the suffering they went to because they were abiding by the rules.
Yes.
But also the expectation is that if you make the rules, you keep the rules.
Right.
Yeah.
But that's not a classical understanding of rule, right? If I rule, then I make the rules. I don't have to abide by them.
Yeah,
Sure.
You know, like ask any character from Persia or Greece or Rome or you know, obviously that's what it means to rule. It means that other people abide by totally different standards to you, and you know.
That's what Christoph Keating has jumped in. He said they make the rules, they don't follow them. And he said that Ferguson even said, I didn't think the rules applied to me.
He actually said that out loud.
Did he?
I mean, we all
I said the
we all
quiet
heard
bit
that.
out loud.
Yeah. Well, none of us thought that lockdown rules applied to us, did they? You know?
It's for those people, yeah.
for the
those
other people. But it was interesting, just the title of my post, which was something about, you know, what's the big deal with hypocrisy, right? What's the big deal?
Yeah.
And actually, it's Christian intuitions and assumptions that have taught us that actually rulers are meant to serve.
Yeah.
And the reason why we have a prime minister is that actually the ruler of our land is the chief servant. It's supposed to be, right?
Yes.
That's the mask he's
Yes.
supposed to wear. He's supposed to be the chief. So, you know, in the classical world, the rulers were gods, and now we call them servants. And we think that actually rulers should abide by a rule that is above them, and that they don't make. Might does not make right, and that there are rights that actually exist naturally or by God, that rulers simply recognize. They don't create and things like that. And all of that is like an entirely Christian assumption.
Yeah.
And so the outrage that we feel at hypocrisy is a very distinctively Christian outrage, whether you've stepped foot inside a church or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But having written that, and they did the title, there were a few people who were like massive lockdown skeptics who didn't even read the article, but they were just like, no, it shows, it goes to show, doesn't it, that Boris didn't believe in the laws that he was laying down, and you know the laws have always been foolish and that kind of thing, and like my message to those guys as well is, well, okay. Take that, and he's still being totally hypocritical. Because, okay, if he doesn't believe in lockdown, actually, then why enforce it on the whole population?
Yeah.
It's the two-facedness. It's the double standard, you know. And if we didn't have double standards, we wouldn't have any standards at all.
Hey.
Well,
Making up for
We're
lost
glad
time.
you got here,
Making
Glenn.
up for lost
Yeah.
time.
We got here.
well, keep your thoughts
We
coming
haven't
in.
just got standards. We've got double the standards.
We'll keep your thoughts coming in about Boris and Partygate. Let us know in the comments what you think, and we'll come back to that in a sec. We'll come and look at some of those comments in a moment. Before we do that, we're going to take a look at a short video which is advertising the Foundry, and that's our intern program which runs throughout the year. And hopefully this video will give you a bit of kind of an insight into what it is and what it involves.
Hi, welcome to Speak Life. Speak Life exists to use creativity to share the Christian message. Want to look inside? Hi, it's Thomas. Sorry, I forgot my key. This is the cutting edge of Speak Life, the Foundry. Do you know what a foundry is? I didn't either. It's where metal is melted, because that's kind of what goes on here in a metaphorical sense. You will learn all the key elements of video production, including shooting, lighting, editing, sound. What else is there? The second key aspect of the Foundry is theological. When you join us here, you will partake in the Foundry Unlocked sessions, which happen on Fridays, and also 4 intensive weeks throughout the year. These will give you a theology of life and mission and a theology of creativity. What's your favourite food?
My favourite food?
Yeah. See you in a bit. If you come here, you will get to work with the wonderful Matir. During your time here, we will support you as you develop your own creative portfolio of projects. You will have access to the senior and technical members of the Speak Life team, and your training will be supervised by Nate Morgan Locke, who is the Speak Life Development Director. You'll even have the opportunity to go on missions around the country, maybe even around the world, with Glen Scrivener or Nate Morgan Locke. Where are we going, Nate?
I'm just going to get some milk, Thomas. I didn't actually ask you to come with me.
Oh. Well, I'll come anyway. No, actually, yeah, I've just remembered. I'll see you in a bit. Thank you. Well, we would love to welcome you here at Speak Life on the South Coast, the Sunshine Coast. So called because it gets more sunshine than any other part of Britain, I think. I once was lost, but now am Foundry.
Well, there we go. That was the Foundry video. Amusing little video there. You might be still completely perplexed by what goes on the Foundry. So, Nate,
I think Foundry alumnus Thomas Thorogood did an excellent job of giving you the information in his own inimitable style. And so basically we are launching the applications for the Foundry 2022 intake right now.
Wow.
Lines are open, people. Join us as soon as you can.
it's ringing.
Yes.
Oh, no.
And yes, so international applications. So we've been blessed to have a lot of international interns over the last 3 years, and those applications need to be in by the 18th of February, which gives you 1 month. And that's not because we're being mean to them. It's just that we've obviously got to sort out visas and getting people here, and it's a bit more complex. And then UK applicants, they have until, I think, Maundy Thursday, which I believe is like the 14th of April or something. But yes, apply now. It's an opportunity to come down and study with us and to train with us, and we'll train you in theological training, theology of creativity and mission. We'll also do lots of training with things like this that we don't actually know how to turn on and off ourselves. So we're not going to train you in the practical things.
We have people.
We have people who know these things.
Exactly. There's people for that. And how do people apply?
So they can go to www.speaklifefoundry.com. .com.
Yeah.
It's a big, strong,
strong one.
website.
It
Isn't
is a strong one.
.com.
Yeah.
You feel safe with the .com.
Absolutely.
Not that
No East End.
.org.uk is not also as strong.
Fine.
It's hard to find
it's-
Speak Lives that are not taken up already.
The Speak Lives. But yes, applications are open now. You can download the information and you can, send us, or if not you, think who do you think this would be good for?
Absolutely.
Who do you think it would be good for, Glenn?
Yeah. I think it's good for anyone who is in between maybe study and work or between jobs. They have 10 months to give to us. They have a passion for Jesus. They have a passion for making him known. And your gifts could be speaking gifts, but your gifts could be filmmaking gifts, could be with online persuasion and entering into the digital space.
The digital
space.
Yeah.
So exciting
I'd love
opportunity. And so get signing up. And if you know people that you think might be good for it, tell them about it, point them in our direction. Some people on the comments enjoying the video. The Samson experiment says, absolutely superb. Great job, Thomas and the team. So there you go.
Oh.
Round of applause over there.
Was that your mum, Thomas?
Yeah. No, Tom. I think Tom, did an excellent job. Which is kind of funny because you two haven't quite had the chance to watch this yet. But
I've just arrived.
Yeah, you've just arrived. But there we go.
So we're going to kind of dive into the mailbag a bit now. We thought, first of all, we'd just look back on some of the comments we've had over the week. So last week we were talking about Novak Djokovic and vaccines in Australia, and that's still kind of running on, isn't it? Bits and bobs in the news. So it'd be interesting to see what some people think about that. So we had, here we go. So Matthew John Crittenden, he said, POM in Her Majesty's Prison, Queensland, checking in. My take on the whole lurgy thing is the mortality rate has been massively overblown from the start, and the experts have gone so far down the cult of vaccines they can't admit this. And that's without bringing the whole big pharma thing into the rat's nest, unjabbed here, and will remain so until I hear anything credible to refute the above. Live not by lies. So...
is this, what's his name again? Crittenden.
Matthew John Crittenden.
Yeah, he's a fan of the show.
Is he a good tennis player? Because there might be a spot open. So
I'm not
maybe
sure.
it's being used up today.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure Melbourne in particular wants to let
Maybe not.
the unvaxxed in.
But if you're already in the country, right? Are there
it's
Aussie
going
unvaxxed
across
players?
state boundaries is a nightmare. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
Goodness me, I didn't
It's been
realise
quite heavy.
It's
I
not a
think,
federal matter. It's a
over
state
there.
matter.
Yeah,
and so
some more comments coming in. So we had Erin Snave. She said, I've never been a fan of Novak, but I am now.
Yeah.
Hope he wins the Oz Open. To me, he's not going to. To me, he's...
Or the next one. He's banned for 3 years.
Says
Isn't that
to
right?
me,
Sounds like
him and his children and his children's children for 3 months.
Yeah.
To me, she says, to me, he's more like Christ because he doesn't give in to the mob. And that's interesting, isn't it? Because I think what we saw in some of the comments, not just on Facebook, not just on YouTube, but in different places, some people looked at Djokovic and said, oh, isn't he like Jesus, standing up, for his principles, standing up against the mob? And other people said, he's not being like Jesus because he's not sacrificing himself, laying down his, his own rights for other people. So
Maybe he's just a tennis player.
Maybe so.
Maybe he's just a victim of the Nadal cabal. We've had, I've seen a lot of support for that over the last week. Huge numbers have been. And
in your dreams.
when will justice be done? That's my question.
But I don't know. Like Novak, I think there is a very principled position of I don't think vaccines should be compelled, and I'm not taking one. I think you can take a very principled position. I'm not sure Novak has been the most principled in all that he's done. So I think even if you take that position,
Yes.
I wouldn't want him as my hero.
If you're not filling in the form properly, and then it gets denied,
Yeah.
it might be the form. Do you know what I mean? It
yeah.
might not actually be.
And
the vaccine status.
and I think whatever kind of resistance you want to give to the system, it should be a case of I'm upfront and I tell the truth about things, and then I take on myself whatever censure is coming my way. And that I don't think that's happened in this case.
Yeah.
But
No, I don't think so.
But I do wish that tennis was a bit more like, professional wrestling. And so, in the final, Nadal will
Chair
be
shots.
there and he's on, match point
You're
or something
obsessed with
like
Nadal.
And then and then, oh my gosh, what's coming down? And then just Jocko comes down with a chair and he's like hitting him, and then he plays tennis with a chair and stuff like that. So,
He's got the steel chair.
yeah, that's what I want.
Well, it's good. It certainly generated some conversation online, that discussion, didn't it? So, which is good to know. Going back to Partygate and Boris, Christoph Keating said, yet another example of how the Queen represents the British people better than elected officials.
Right. Right.
She's glorious.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of her
Well,
Majesty.
like the Queen,
democracy is not Christian, is it? You know, a constitutional monarchy is far closer to what the scriptures talk
But
about.
also, wasn't it interesting? It's like the Queen is the trump card, right? Okay, you play that card, and suddenly it wasn't like, oh, look at these people, they're just having a party, and you didn't get to do what you needed to do or wanted to do during COVID.
Yeah.
It's here's Her Majesty the Queen.
Yes.
And everyone's like, oh my, like that suddenly stepped it up a gear.
Yeah. But for every royalist, you better hope that when the Queen moves on, that there is not a bus crash such that Prince Andrew then becomes the monarch. You know, like pick your royal.
That's a discussion for another week, as I'm sure we'll get round to that one.
But everyone's a royalist until they go down the list.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah.
You don't have to go too far down the list.
Connor Borthwick said, "Evening, folks. I'm so grateful for this show. I don't have many thoughts on the parties during lockdown, to be honest. I'm so exhausted with the pantomime as a whole." And he said, "I'll be very grateful the day
Who's
it's
been
out of the
to
news."
go to pantomimes?
He said, "I'll be very grateful the day it's out of the news, although I fear the thing they'll replace it with. Good luck with the Foundry." I think we all understand that feeling, don't we, of just being a bit fed up with these things coming around. But then I also wonder whether that's slightly what the Tories would hope is going to happen. We'll be fed up. You know, Liz Truss said, didn't she? We just need to move on now.
Right.
You know,
Get Brexit done, and then get your outrage done. Let's move on and keep on with the Boris show.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah,
that's
yeah.
what they're hoping, isn't it? But whoever's leaking, have you talked about whoever's leaking this stuff? Because it's like,
yes, we did. Yeah.
Initials DC.
but it's just brilliant. Every 3 days, it's like, boo. How many other bullets in the chamber?
He's like a sniper up in the watchtower, isn't he? Sort of,
Yeah.
and just take him at will. There's
Immovable.
nothing they can do.
Yeah. Well, good thoughts there. Do keep the comments coming in. Do if you're watching this after the fact, let us know down on the YouTube comments below what you think about this situation. Last week we started a new segment of the show, which we still don't have a real name for. It's where we look at a movie.
Not movie tag?
Well,
Or
movie tag was kind of thrown in there. Pete Thorne said, if your film tag section wanted an Epiphany themed title, then Follow the Star seems appropriate. Because part of the way we're doing this is that you've got to have the next film has to have someone in it. Yeah, a link in some
need your
way.
link.
And so last week we had a bit on the Green Mile from Nate, and actually it's Michael Aiken. That's his name on YouTube.
Okay.
Said, I just watched The Green Mile this evening, and I love the analysis on it. I'd never even considered the justice that John enacted, but you're right that it came as a kind of package deal. It surprised me when it happened, because up until that moment, John seemed so harmless and innocent. I guess that is much like the difficulty many have reconciling God's love and justice. Absolutely fantastic movie. So yeah, lots of good stuff
and
there.
it makes you cheer on God's justice as well as his mercy,
Yeah.
which is, amazing.
You want to see the justice, don't you, come as well? Yeah, so we're on to the second week now. So I was tasked then with choosing the film. So the film, we've already said it, haven't we? We already said what the film is.
have we?
At the beginning, pretty sure we did. Yeah,
Is
so
it it's probably in the title? The
it's
description?
in the
title.
description of
Yeah,
the
it's in the
video.
description.
Oh, that's lame.
So
reveal.
we had a Tom Hanks film last week, and so I went for an obvious link, Tom Hanks again. So I went for The Road to Perdition.
Or just Road to Perdition, I think. There's
It's not the. It's
no
not even the definitive
definite
version.
article.
There may be
No,
other versions
just-
available. And so 2002, Sam Mendes film. It's got Tom Hanks, Paul Newman, Daniel Craig, and Stanley Tucci. Is that how we're saying it? How are we saying this?
Tucci.
Is it like
Toshi.
Tucci?
Tucci.
It's like
Tucci,
Gucci.
yeah, like
Tucci,
Gucci.
Gucci.
Like
Yeah,
Gucci.
yeah, yeah.
Tucci like Gucci.
So, Road to Perdition, 2002. Brief synopsis. So, Mike Sullivan, Tom Hanks' character, is an enforcer for a powerful Depression-era Midwestern mobster, John Rooney, played by Paul Newman. Rooney's son, Connor, played by Daniel Craig, is jealous of the close bond they share. And when Mike's eldest son, Michael, witnesses a hit, Connor uses the incident as an excuse to murder Sullivan's wife and youngest son. Forced to flee, Sullivan and Michael set out on a journey of revenge and self-discovery. So we've all watched this film, though, haven't we?
We have.
I had to go. I saw it
Yeah.
not long after it came out. I remember I got it on a rented VHS from the cost cutter at the end of the road.
Always rely on cost.
This is still like 2002. It came out, right?
So this would have been like when I was in school, so 2003, 2004
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
And so I remember watching it then, but I had to go and rewatch it. It is on Disney.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to look up what perdition actually means. Apparently, it's a state of eternal punishment and damnation into which a sinful and unrepentant person passes after death. And yeah, it's a really good film. I watched it again on Friday, and I know you guys have watched it this week as well. And yeah, it throws up lots of kind of interesting things. Tom Hanks's character, you see that his relationship to the kind of mob boss, played by Paul Newman, he's kind of like an adopted son to him. Newman is kind of his father figure, really. And so he's been raised into this world of kind of crime and this hitman role. But you see that as a character, he's not someone who revels in it. He doesn't really, it's not something he enjoys doing. And, you know, he lives in a nice house, he's got a family, but there's a sense in which everything he's got has come from this man, you know, that he's beholden to this guy. But there is a sense that despite the fact he does this quite terrible job, you sense that he is kind of he could have been a good guy if he hadn't been raised in this environment with this guy. And you see all through the film, you know, there's not just him, but lots of characters. There's a lot of religious stuff, religious imagery, attending church, there's prayer. And he very much doesn't want his son to end up like him. And that's kind of the big thing, really. And then you've kind of got Paul Newman's character, who is the mob boss, John Rooney. And one of the characters says of him at the beginning, you rule this town like God rules the earth. You give and you take away.
And then he gets taken
and then
away.
That guy does get taken away. But you see, you see that actually, as this kind of mob boss that he is, he's not this kind of caricatured monster. Because actually, even as that guy's taken away, he says, just talk to him.
Yes.
And so he's not just this kind of hardened person. He has got this more human side to him. And yeah, he has Hanks, you know, Tom Hanks's character is like this adopted son to him. And very much so, you see that when Tom Hanks's son witnesses this hit, the mob boss, Paul Newman's character, is happy for them just to keep quiet about it. You know, there's not this kind of sense of, well, we just got to silence them. That comes in with his actual son, played by Daniel Craig, Connor, who's kind of heir to the Empire, and you can see actually he does love he revels in the killing.
It's all the Englishmen, isn't it? In the whole film, there's Jude Law and there's Daniel Craig, and
Jude
without
Law
the
does crop up
Englishmen,
as well.
Yes,
there'd be
it'd
zero
be
body counts.
fine.
It'd be fine.
Yeah.
I think Tom Hanks takes out a couple.
He does take out a couple.
Only because Daniel Craig starts it. You know, it's the
Well,
English.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
isn't
true.
it?
So Connor Rooney, the son of the mob boss. I mean, they've got a very fractured relationship, and he ends up killing Tom Hanks's wife and his son. It's the wrong son. He thinks he's going to kill the son who witnessed the events, but he actually kills the other son, and then ends up kind of being put into hiding to hide from Tom Hanks's character, who kind of goes on this revenge kind of thing. But I think, you know, to describe it as a revenge film, I think is a bit overly
it's a gangster film, and gangster films are usually about justice. That's the main, justice and loyalty as these two kind of primary sort of things that are going on. And gangster films, when they think about justice, the good guy, as in the good mob and the good mafioso, is an eye for an eye guy.
Yeah.
So, and that's what makes Paul Newman's character, when he says, you know, just talk to him, he's saying, what is the proportionate response that is needed at this situation? And we don't go beyond that.
Yeah.
And in that way, he's quite similar to Don Corleone in The Godfather, because, you know, when think of his opening scene, stroking the cat, and it's, you come to me, you say you want justice. This is not justice. Your daughter is still alive. And so there's a very clear sense of an eye for an eye. But then clearly, once you have a central character, we care very much what happens to those who are connected to them. And so the fact that Michael Sullivan's wife and son are killed, that's now changed things.
Yeah.
because for us as the audience, those two characters, their lives are way more valuable than any of the other people who got killed. You know, any of the henchmen, like, you know,
No matter what kind of
that was like an
family.
Austin Powers thing,
Yeah,
wasn't it?
brilliant.
Like, you know,
No one cares about those guys.
no one ever thinks about the henchmen. They always get killed, you know,
henchmen.
or stormtroopers. So
Just
yeah,
got a
like
phone from
not
your
every.
dad's
No,
work.
so in a storytelling sense, not every death has got the same value in that sense. But yeah, it's both, it's justice and loyalty, but also I think this film, and I was kind of struck by it because I don't know quite that it pulls it off towards the end with the, was it self-discovery or whatever they put into
what
that
they put in the
synopsis. It's a father-son film,
Sure.
and father-son films tend to involve, usually the father has this learning moment where he moves towards his son in kindness, which has not been seen before. And the son usually learns to grow into the role of the father and hopefully be better than his father was. And that is a key theme in the film.
But I think what it speaks to is a kind of a father-son cycle of violence and deadbeat dads.
Yeah.
And it's just got to be down to Michael Jr. It's like you can't wait for Tom Hanks to come good. And in the final scene, do we give spoilers or not? What's the rule?
It's been out since Cost Cutter was giving away VHS. But if you don't want to know, stop it now and then come back and listen to it another time. How about that?
Maybe. Yeah.
Go and watch it.
Go watch it and then
Disney
watch the
Plus,
rest of
come
the
back.
Speakeasy another time.
Yeah, well, it starts out that, it becomes revealed that Tom Hanks did not quite love his elder boy as much as the younger boy because he reminded him of himself.
Yeah.
And so the arc is, to begin with, Michael Jr. is perhaps en route to become Michael Sr. And yet at the end, he can't pull the trigger. And his father does it for him, and he says, I couldn't do it. And Tom Hanks, I know, with pride.
Yeah.
And then he says, that's the last time I ever, Michael Jr. says, that's the last time I ever heard a gun, you know. And then he gets adopted by the lovely couple who, couldn't have kids. And
But yeah, I mean, and from a filmmaking point of view, that's the bit I thought was rushed. Like you said,
I
you
said
thought-
earlier that it was really nice to watch a film that was sub 2 hours, but for once I sat there and thought that could have done with another half an hour to really develop some of those ideas.
Because
Because
it's gorgeous, right? It's San Mendes, it's the guy who films it, Conrad L. Hall, I think was his name, and he got the best cinematography Oscar for that film. So it's really good. But you do think, from a storytelling point of view, when they have that conversation, when he says, "So did you love me any differently than you loved my brother?" or whatever the words he uses, and I thought, huh? We're doing this now? This needed to be earlier on. I needed to see more of this.
And then Michael Jr. kind of fills you in with a voiceover when he says, and that was the last time I ever heard a gunshot. And,
Well, as I watched it, so I very much thought, it is a father-son film, and there is this sense of, is our children destined to just repeat, like you say, this cycle? Is how do you break this cycle of sin? And so for me, it felt very sort of original sin, kind of Adam-like. They're kind of born into this life. So how can they escape it? And that's what I mean. One of the big kind of bits, when finally Newman's character and Hank's character come back together, when they have a discussion in the church. Newman's character says, "This is the life we've chosen. There's only one guarantee: none of us will see heaven." And then Tom Hanks replies, "Michael could." And so Rooney says, "Do everything in your power to see that he does." So the whole, I think the whole thing is revolving around this question of how do you get out of this cycle? And for me, I'm not. So the answer for Hanks seems to be, well, I would just wipe out everything to do with this. So his thing is to kill everybody, basically.
Kill them all.
So I came away feeling that I wasn't hugely satisfied with. I mean, so the son is like, I never held a gun again.
Yeah.
But to me, it just feels like it could easily have gone the other way. That he'd seen all this, and he could have become exactly what his father was. So I just felt it never quite got to why that breaks the cycle.
Yeah.
So I wasn't quite satisfied with how it did it. But I felt like it was asking big questions about redemption. How can this child be redeemed from this life, and can Tom Hanks's character be redeemed at all through what he's
Yeah.
doing.
And in some ways, when you watch a gangster film, usually, I mean, sometimes the police might be in as like an alternative gang, the state police gang, and then there's all these other mobs that have to be kind of dealt with. But as a general rule, these are intensely patriarchal films, and so they remind you so much of Genesis. Because you're reading about these, parent, father, son, and father, son, and father, son, and there is no nation state that's sort of governing these things. There is no Boris Johnson to set some rules to break the rules, right? It's it's a kind of Wild West thing, and these godfathers, these mob bosses, they rule. And I think with these, there's particularly because they often have a very strong religious, usually Catholic kind of element to them, that characters, like we talked about with the Green Mile last week, you will enact the death penalty at the exact moment that you say, may God have mercy on your soul. So there's a sense of earthly justice that must be done, and then a divine justice into which the person who's being killed is being sort of offered. And I think that's a very, very interesting concept to think about, is you can have a poetic justice. You can have Michael Sullivan, bringing vengeance and, bringing the criminals who killed his wife and children to justice. Actually all set within a world which is very clear on there is God's justice. And the strange thing about the father, son, and will there be one born who could be pure and different and separate and set apart? Well, that's going to be Michael Jr. And certainly there's the sense of a promised one. Like there must be someone who could be pristine off the back of this, because most of us were all compromised. We're all locked into this cycle of sin.
And so you've got Paul Newman, Tom Hanks is adopted into one family, and it has its results. And at the end, you have the seed of Tom Hanks adopted into a different family and embracing the way of non-violence, not answering tit for tat, turning the other cheek, if you like. It wasn't really, but if anything is going to arrest the cycle of violence, somebody has to not pull the trigger when it is called for. And so Michael Jr. is that kind of Christ figure in terms of the promised son in the old family, part of the new family. The non-violence thing, and the tit for tat thing is interesting too in terms of turn the other cheek. I was really struck end of last year looking through Matthew 5 and Jesus saying, you've heard that it was said, eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, and you've heard that it was said, love your enemies, and love your neighbor and hate your enemies, and it was just fascinating that Jesus is just commenting on the religious culture of his day, and they picked up the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, and they picked up love your neighbor, and they had kind of intuited and developed things into hate your enemy, and I just think that these kinds of films, these gangster films, show you where. What am I thinking of? Show you where. Eye for an eye gets you.
Yes.
And it is not justice. Like when it interacts with human flesh, it becomes vengeance. And almost inevitably becomes vengeance. Yeah. And what would it take to undo the circle of violence? It would take someone who actually took the hit and didn't repay. And so, you get a kind of a photo negative really of what it is that would take. What would it take to undo the cycle of violence? It would take something like a Michael Jr.
And that's why you sort of wanted to see an extra half an hour, 20 minutes in that homestead where the couple, the guy's doing a bit of gardening or something, and Michael Jr., they're sitting on the veranda drinking the coffee and making comments and things. And you thought that being fleshed out a bit might have given us more satisfaction that... when these terrible things have come to pass, this is why Michael Jr. has the opportunity to really break the cycle. But a brilliant film, a gorgeous film.
Yeah,
What
it's
one
beautiful.
thing that I always am fascinated by is whenever you find a film where a family sits at a table and says grace before a meal, there's always a subtext of absolute violence. There's like
Even
always
Talladega Nights.
And the little
but
baby
they
Jesus.
just and it's weird and trained and the only you get anytime an American suburban family, a white American suburban family is shown sitting at the table saying grace, there is always this it's almost like it's like a proper cliche for look how tense everyone is around this table.
Except
And look
for
at what's going
Don't
on.
Look Up. Have you seen Don't Look Up?
I've not
Yeah,
seen
yeah,
on
that's
Netflix?
true. Yeah, at the end.
Okay.
It finishes with people at a table and someone saying, I don't know what to do. Shall I say grace? And someone says a prayer.
But it's
at the
interesting.
table.
You get it. So my thinking is once you have usually like a South American family or an African family, you tend to see the table, the family table, as this great place of welcome. And maybe it's because often these domestic dining room scenes are usually a very closed nuclear family, that it doesn't have that sense of outward grace. Whereas my guess is that is not a nuclear family that's sitting down at a table.
No.
So, and that's one of those interesting film kind of
Tropes.
Yeah, tropes will do. Yeah.
Jinx.
Well, I mean, there's a lot. I'm sure we could say loads more. If you've not seen it, do go and have a watch of it. I mean, even if you just want to enjoy a nice film, it's a great film. But there's lots to think about in it. And we'll obviously have another one next week. And Glenn, I think you have to choose next week. We did come up with a rule earlier.
Yeah.
A new rule that said you can't do the same link twice. So you
So it
can't
can't
choose
be-
another
you can't
Tom
go
Hanks.
It can't be T. Hanks for watching.
Yeah, we can't
that,
just
that
keep
can't be
Tom
the
Hanks
name
whole
of
time.
the...
Yeah.
Okay, shall I say now? Because then people can do their homework.
Well, that's not
Well,
bad. If you
I've
know
got.
what
We've
should I
got.
not?
A,
We already think we know what you're going to
we
pick.
think
but-
we
Yeah,
can
you
know
probably
what we're
do,
going
you
to do.
probably
Okay, after three. One,
Two,
two, three.
The
Talented
talented
Mr. Ripley. Yes. Talented Mr. Ripley, because the link is
Jude Law.
Jude Law. Isn't
Yeah.
that interesting?
Another
Who was
bad
Tom Hanks
Englishman.
pursued by? The law. It's coming after him. The
An
law.
Englishman. Just
Yes.
not jogging.
Okay, so Talented Mr. Ripley. That's one for us to try and watch before next week.
Yep.
And I'm just thinking maybe for some people it might be helpful for us, maybe as we do this, to kind of throw out some ways, what are the tools we're using to actually
Analyze these
analyse
films.
these films. That might be helpful for people.
If we knew that, we'd have been doing this way better than.
Dear me. Okay, so that's what we're going to do next week. So, okay, we're kind of running out of time, and we hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I'm sure you'll be letting us know down in the comments what you think about Boris, or Road to Perdition, or even the Talented Mr. Ripley coming up. But today is Blue Monday, isn't it?
We're not actually allowed to play the song.
That's a YouTube copyright strike right there.
Okay.
Supposedly today is the most depressing day of the year, isn't it? Like,
Really?
all the bills come in, and
Yeah.
the weather's terrible, and it's the dark. It's all dark.
It's been
and
beautiful.
stuff.
Gorgeous
So we
pink
thought,
moon this morning.
yeah,
and
actually,
just-
I went for a stroll earlier, and it was beautiful. Yeah. So, but actually, we thought just to cheer you up on the way out, we would leave you with this little number from Mr. Nick Harvey on Twitter, doing his own rendition of Blue Monday with his dog Ember.